You know, it's my great pleasure tonight to introduce a friend. Dan Patrick came on the scene when he decided to run for the state senate. Dan, when was that? 06 for the 07 session. And Dan likes to say that the Texas Homeschool Coalition was the only organization that endorsed him in that initial race. And I said, well, Dan, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. I called all my conservative friends in Houston. They were all supporting him. And Dan went to the Texas Senate, and he stirred things up. He did some things differently. And you guys might remember that in the old days, the House was the conservative body, and the Senate was the moderate body. And when Dan ran for lieutenant governor, the big debate we were all having is, why do we have the two-thirds rule that allows the Democratic minority to control things? And Dan became lieutenant governor, and he changed that so that now the Republican majority controls the agenda. Yes. And Dan has moved the Texas Senate to become the model for a conservative body and what a conservative leader can do in that legislative body. And Dan has been unabashedly conservative on fiscal issues, on social issues, on parental rights and homeschooling. And I am proud to say that Dan Patrick is a friend of mine and a friend to the parents and the homeschoolers and families of Texas. Would you help me welcome Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I have all kind of mics here. Forgive my voice, a little under the weather. I have this mic, this mic. I'm going to use these two lav mics so I can just walk around to the audio team. All right? Everybody hear me all right? Or is it, maybe I'm louder. It's good, it's okay. First of all, again, I apologize for the voice. No one likes to be around someone who has germs or is giving a speech with a sore throat. But I just love the Homeschool Coalition. Tim's done such a great job. The parents, the students, and I really try to be at as many events. I think maybe I've missed one in 10 years. And so I wanted to be here tonight, at least for a little while, to tell you what an important job, parents, that you are doing. And to the students, I just want to tell you how proud your parents are and we are. We have great kids in our public school system. We have great teachers in our public school system. We have some great schools. But I will tell you en masse, when I'm around the homeschool students, I just find students that are so respectful and polite. Mom doesn't put up with shenanigans in your classroom. And I used to always say, and it's true, of the people who come to lobby us, I always enjoyed when I was a senator, and now as lieutenant governor, when the students come, when the homeschoolers come to lobby, because it's the students, and I think it's just really special. Brian Hughes is here tonight from the Senate, and Brian, as a freshman senator, did an incredible job this first session, standing up for homeschoolers. We had some bills that we couldn't get out of state affairs because we didn't have votes. We didn't have enough votes to get them out. But Brian, who's a little bit of a, in fact, he's not a little bit, he's a lot of a country preacher and a country lawyer, which is a deadly combination, and he was able to amend that legislation on other bills so that we were sure that we get it passed. So Brian, great job as a freshman. My friend Angela Paxton is here, and what a blessing she has been. It's been a difficult time for the Paxton family. You know, in my view, he's just under a political attack. I stay out of the courts, but it looks like to me it's nothing but a political attack. And she has stood with her children and with her husband against these attacks with great integrity and dignity. And Angela, now you're running for the Senate. Thank you. I know this has been a very difficult time. But the Lord, the victory is the Lord. The horse is made ready for battle, but the victory is the Lord's. You know, I used to tell folks that when I pray, I would always pray for supernatural words, wisdom, favor. And I was actually speaking to Angela's Christian school graduation class. You remember that night? Was that 2 years ago or 3? Time goes so fast. And she said, you left something out. I said, what did I leave out? I always pray for supernatural words, wisdom, and favor. Because if you ask, the Scripture says God will give you wisdom if you ask. He'll give you the words to express that wisdom. And favor is the opportunity to speak before people who need to hear the word, and sometimes people that just need to be reassured. We all need to be reassured at times as believers. And she said you have to include the word courage. So now I always pray for supernatural words, wisdom, favor, and courage. Because a lot of people have the wisdom, a lot of people have the words, a lot of people have the opportunity, but they don't have the courage to stand up. And we need the Christian community to have courage. We're in a battle, folks, in this country, in the state, within our own party, actually, with some folks. There was actually a story last week in one of the journals in Austin said the Republican Party has to get out of the pulpit. Can you imagine that? I mean, like people who believe in God are going to say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I think it's more important I stay in office and listen to you than listen to God. You know? I mean, God's there for eternity. It's amazing where we are in this country. You know, I remember through learning from Tim, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but back in the 80s, when it was against the law to be a homeschool parent, you know, you could go to jail for it. People who have turf to protect fight really hard. How many times did we go to court on that before you won? 6, 7 times? Finally, the parents stood up for their children. We now have 6 million students in Texas, roughly. About 5.2 million in public schools, about 200,000 in public charters, about 250,000 or so in private schools, and about 300,000 homeschool. And again, I just applaud you for what you do. Tim was right. When I ran in 2006 for the Senate, no one wanted me in the Senate of the establishment. And so no one would support me. But the homeschoolers did. Sarah Singleton, Donna Bahorich. Isn't this amazing? This is how the Lord works. Donna Bahorich, she was my first campaign manager. And she's now the chair of the State Board of Education as a homeschool mom. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Ice cream and ice cream. Excuse me. I remember going to a meeting with Sarah and Donna at a Mexican restaurant over on Clay Road and Highway 6 in the Houston area, and I said, so I didn't know a lot about the homeschool. My wife was a school teacher, but I didn't know a lot about homeschoolers, to be very candid with you. And I said, so if I'm elected, what is it that you expect from your senator? And they said, not to do anything, to stay out of our life. Right, Sarah? Where's Sarah? I see Robin and Jim Lennon over there. Good to see y'all. So I'm pretty good at, doing nothing. So it's worked out all right, Tim. Before my friend Rafael Cruz speaks, and I've already apologized to him for leaving, I'm going to go home and get some rest. So I'm on one of those runs where I have 14 night events in 16 days. So I need to try to get some rest and rest my voice, or I'm going to be sounding like this for the next 2 weeks. How many of you in here, because I know some families were invited, were impacted by Hurricane Harvey? For those of you who were not, or live in another area where the storm didn't hit, but you had to be pretty far away for it not to hit, it impacted 10 million residents in Texas, more than a third of our population. About 5 million people directly impacted on a storm that hit from Corpus Christi all the way to Beaumont, which is about 300 miles. I was on Fox a lot during the storm, and I would try to paint the picture for the viewers. That'd be like the hurricane hitting New York City and Maine flooding. That's how big the storm was, 300 miles. And through it all, I never met an angry person. It was a wonderful time in the darkest of times. You know, Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens, it was the darkest of times and the best of times. The worst of times, the best of times. The darkest and the lightest of times, the brightest. And that's what we saw. People have lost everything. I met a 90-year-old man on West Houston whose home flooded. And he said, Dan, my whole life's on the curb. His whole life was on the curb. He can't recover. A lot of people lost everything they've ever had. Some people didn't have much to begin with. Some people had a lot. We were one Texan. We were not Democrats or Republicans or liberals or conservatives, or there were no black, white, and brown issues. Whoever was in the boat didn't care who they rescued on the roof, and who was ever on the roof didn't care who was in the boat. Brian Hughes, Cole Hefner, came down from Tyler, Texas. That's where Brian, with a boat. They rescued someone next to Representative Jim Murphy, his next door neighbor. We had our own Dunkirk, kind of. We really did. There were 1,000. I flew up to, President Trump came in on the Tuesday right after the storm hit, which was only 5 days, and the only airport that was open was in Conroe. And I didn't know if I could get to Conroe. We were able to get up there with the help of the state police. And as I drove up from the Grand Parkway, once I got on 45 North, I'm not exaggerating, there was an entire line of cars and trucks towing boats, all the way from the Woodlands to Conroe and beyond. It was unbelievable how people came together. And for the students in here, it's a great lesson for you. It's a great lesson that it's important at times, many times, to stand for what you believe and stand on your values. But the best way to influence people for your principles and your values is demonstrating them by the way you live your life. And all of these homes that have been mucked out, I've been down there mucking out some homes with Senator Larry Taylor down in Clear Lake. If it weren't for the church, there'd be very few people standing up and going out in these homes. I think somewhere between 80 and 90% of the people working in these private homes, taking out the sheetrock and the kitchens and the carpet, were church organized. So let me leave you with this. Psalms 57, verse 1 and 2. Psalms 57 says, I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until this disaster has passed. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until this disaster passes. Now, disaster can mean a lot to a lot of people. It could be a divorce. It could be a loss of a job. It could be a loss of a business. It could be being diagnosed with a serious illness. It could be your home being destroyed and losing everything you own. I looked up the word refuge. I knew what it meant, but I wanted to see what Webster said about it. And it said refuge is defined as a shelter in times of danger. So Psalms 57, I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until this disaster passes. What people found out during the storm was, first of all, when it comes to Texans and they have their back against the wall and need help, we all come together. That's number one. Number two, a lot of people discovered, I know the Lennons, their home collapsed on top of them. Collapsed, right? Collapsed over in Kingwood. What we found out is what we thought was our shelter was not our true shelter, because storms can knock down our home, blow off the roof. And then people went to a Red Cross or a government, quote, temporary shelter. They went to a temporary shelter, but it's a temporary shelter. That's what it is. All right, thank you. So who is our true shelter? And I'm not here to preach, but I know I can count on Raphael to give me an amen. The truth is, our only refuge in life is Jesus Christ. That's our refuge. That's our shelter from danger for life and for eternity. And so in this worst of times and the best of times, a lot of people who have not been focused on the church are starting to focus on the church. You know, in Roman times, there were a series of plagues and disasters, leprosy, different issues where people in Rome, the secular Romans, turned their back on fellow Romans. They didn't do what we did in Texas. They turned their back on them. But the Christian community in Rome came forward. So much that time after time. And Constantine, the emperor, finally said, you know what, these Christians they're very special. They took people in that our own citizens wouldn't take in. And so he made Christianity the official religion of Rome. It was through their works and good works. I think that that's what we're seeing in Texas. Again, it was the Christian community that stepped up. They were doing the right thing. So remember Psalms 57. No matter what because we're all going to have a disaster in life at some point. We all do. Life is not easy for Christians. It's just not. There's no trajectory from birth to death like that. I don't know of anybody that hasn't had, some valleys along the way. So no matter what it is, just remember, I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until this disaster passes. For homeschoolers, the teachers, and for the students, I'm really counting on you to be the light for our country, raising up the next generation that will be our leaders. Again, this is not a negative comment on public schools or charter schools, but you're one part of that. God's been kicked out of our public schools, sadly. But God, I know, is alive in many homeschools. So, you are those who I'm counting on, along with many families from our public and charter schools. You're the next generation students. There's a research done that says that Donald Trump won because of the Christian vote. The Christian vote. And why is the left so mad? Why are the Democrats so mad at Hillary? Because they had a plan to take over this country, kick God out. Take over this country over 30 or 40 years by doing three things. Take over higher education. They pretty much accomplished a lot of that. Conservatives can't even go and speak on a lot of campuses now. Number two, take over the media. I grew up in the media. I can tell you. It's gotten so liberal, I don't even recognize it anymore. And then the last part was to take over the judiciary. So that no matter how many Republicans were in office, no matter what court decisions were made at the lower level, when it got to the Supreme Court, 5 liberal justices would overturn anything that was good and godly. They came that close to owning the country. And that's why they're angry. And it was the people who stood up in America that allowed, as I was with Donald Trump Wednesday, he was in Dallas, as he said, I'm not a perfect Christian, like any of us are. It took that guy, and if you look at the Bible so often, as Raphael knows, has taken the most unusual people to move the message forward. And so we have to stay engaged so that you always have the freedom, because remember, there are people who would take away your freedom to be homeschoolers and to be homeschool parents. And so we must stand tall. We must have a robust public education system, charter, homeschool, private, all in one. There's no other place in America like Texas. Texas is the America that all America used to be. That's why people keep coming here. No one moves to Texas. I met a family up here. They just got here from California. I was never one of these people for seceding because too many people have died to keep our country together. And then I saw California wants to secede, and I went online and gave them $10. I think it's a wonderful idea. But no one moves to Texas. You arrive here, and Texas moves into you. God bless. Good night, everybody. Thank you.